What happens when a Hollywood A-lister tries to control the internet and the internet fights back? This is the story of Blake Lively's lawsuit unraveling in real time. What started as a personal legal battle against director Justin Baldoni has exploded into something far bigger and far more controversial. Blake Lively isn't just facing legal resistance. She's facing a growing revolt from independent voices across the digital world, YouTubers, TikTokers, legal analysts, podcasters, all under fire from her legal team. Over the past few weeks, her attorneys have gone from court motions to content takedown subpoenas and even alleged attempts to intimidate creators who simply talked about the case. But the move has backfired spectacularly, and now the story isn't just about the lawsuit anymore. It's about celebrity overreach, legal censorship, and a battle over who gets to speak freely online. The backlash has been swift and brutal. A growing number of creators are speaking out. Major media outlets are turning on Blake, even judges are questioning whether her legal team crossed the line. And in the court of public opinion, the verdict is already coming and Blake's strategy is collapsing. So what went wrong? Why are content creators suddenly the main targets, and what could this mean for the future of free speech online? In this video, we're breaking down every twist, every leak, every viral reaction, and exposing how a high-profile lawsuit turned into one of the biggest PR disasters in modern Hollywood history. Stay with us, because once you hear what Blake Lively's team tried to do behind the scenes, you'll understand why. Creators everywhere are saying we will not be silenced. The unraveling began quietly. Whispers in legal circles, murmurs on social media, and coded phrases in redacted filings suggested something was off. What once seemed like a meticulously coordinated lawsuit against actor-director Justin Baldoni was now showing major cracks. But what stunned insiders and observers alike wasn't just the potential weakness. In Blake Lively's case, it was the sudden and aggressive shift in her legal team's strategy. Instead of focusing solely on Baldoni or other direct parties, they began widening the scope and pointing the spotlight toward content creators. Yes, the people covering the case: online YouTubers, TikTokers, journalists with independent followings, and commentators were now in the line of fire. What was initially considered a defamation or personal lawsuit morphed into something far bigger. Something that started resembling an intimidation campaign, or at the very least, a desperate redirection of legal pressure. In early July, court records confirmed that subpoenas had been sent to multiple content creators, including some with mid-sized platforms. While the court filings did not name every creator, several individuals came forward online to confirm they had been contacted, asked to preserve evidence, or even submit documents. The reaction was swift. Creators pushed back, lawyers raised red flags, and the broader public asked one question: why now? Many speculate that Blake's legal strategy had reached a breaking point, with motions being denied, discovery not going as planned, and key text messages potentially becoming admissible. Her legal team might have realized that the case against Baldoni wasn't as ironclad as once thought, and so the attention shifted to the narrative, the media, the voices that were questioning and analyzing the story in real time. But this new strategy has not been without consequences. It opened Blake's team up to accusations of silencing critics, of leveraging her celebrity status to suppress independent commentary, and of potentially violating fair use principles or First Amendment protections. Lawyers online, including several with strong media law backgrounds, noted that the line between public scrutiny and targeted harassment is thin, and Lively's team might be getting dangerously close to crossing it. Content creators, meanwhile, are not backing down. Some are now banding together, hiring counsel, or speaking openly about their experiences. One YouTuber who received a subpoena late last month said in a live stream, "I was shocked. I have less than 100K subs, but apparently covering this trial makes you a threat." The case's public narrative is also shifting. Once framed as a bold stand for personal justice, Blake's lawsuit is increasingly being painted as a fragile, possibly failing attempt to control the story. And the irony, the very attempt to suppress the conversation has only amplified it. Now more people than ever are paying attention not just to the trial, but to Blake Lively's choices within it. As pressure mounted on Blake Lively's legal team, observers noticed a distinct pivot, not just in the rhetoric being used in court filings, but in how her lawyers were attempting to control the narrative outside the courtroom. Suddenly, statements weren't just directed at the judge or opposing counsel. They were seemingly crafted for the media, and more specifically for the online community of creators discussing the case. Why? Because commentary around the lawsuit had taken on a life of its own. Dozens of YouTubers, TikTokers, podcasters, and legal analysts had been following the Lively v. Baldoni saga from day one. Some were highlighting the legal inconsistencies in Blake's argument. Others were pointing out how her team appeared to be leveraging reputation and influence to shape public opinion, but most were simply analyzing the documents and drawing conclusions that weren't flattering to Blake Lively's case. That appears to be when the targeting began. Several content creators reported receiving cease and desist letters. Others got subpoenas that were wide in scope, requesting emails, internal discussions, and video transcripts. A few were asked to disclose any communication with Justin Baldoni's team, and implication that shook many in the creator world was Blake's legal team suggesting that content creators were conspiring with her legal opponent. That alone hinted at an alarming new tone, adversarial, overreaching, and arguably detached from the core issue of the lawsuit. What stood out to many legal observers was the lack of proportionality. Most of these creators weren't mainstream news outlets. They were digital personalities, often with part-time or independent operations. The idea that someone with a podcast recorded from their bedroom could now be entangled in a multi-million-dollar legal case involving Hollywood elites was unprecedented, and many called it unjustified. Media analysts quickly took notice. Several prominent voices argued that Blake's approach wasn't just legally questionable, it could backfire publicly. One entertainment lawyer interviewed on a live stream panel said bluntly, "This reeks of intimidation. It sends a message that if you talk about this case, you might be dragged into it. That's dangerous precedent." And the backlash began building. Creators banded together. Some began openly sharing their subpoenas and legal notices online, redacting names but revealing enough detail to spark alarm. A popular TikToker who specializes in media commentary said in a video that went viral, "They're not just coming after Justin anymore, they're coming after us. All of us who dared to cover this story." Public perception started shifting. While Blake Lively still had a loyal fanbase and powerful allies, the broader public was no longer viewing her solely as a brave plaintiff fighting for justice. Instead, questions swirled. Why were creators being targeted? What exactly was Blake Lively trying to hide? And more importantly, what could possibly be in these videos or discussions that threatened her case so deeply? Even celebrities, usually hesitant to weigh in on legal drama involving their peers, started taking subtle jabs. A cryptic post by an actor closely affiliated with the Baldoni camp read, "Funny how silence becomes dangerous when the wrong people break it." That post alone was shared more than 200,000 times on X, formerly Twitter, and the message was clear. Blake's strategy wasn't working, it was collapsing under the weight of public scrutiny. And it wasn't just social media, news outlets picked up the story. Headlines like "Blake Lively's legal team accused of silencing critics," and "From lawsuit to media suppression" started to appear. As more and more creators spoke out and legal experts raised red flags, the case transformed from a private dispute into a symbol of celebrity overreach. It was no longer just about justice. It was about control, power, and whether public figures could weaponize the legal system to shut down conversation. That's a question bigger than any one lawsuit. And Blake Lively, intentionally or not, had just stepped into that spotlight. The strategy that once seemed carefully orchestrated was now backfiring loudly and publicly. With subpoenas issued to creators and private demands sent to platforms, Blake Lively's legal team triggered the very thing they likely wanted to avoid: an internet-wide reckoning. And unlike a controlled courtroom environment, the internet moves fast, speaks louder, and fights back harder. Creators who had initially stayed neutral were now stepping up. One legal channel with over 500,000 subscribers did a full breakdown of the subpoenas, exposing how loosely they were written, how speculative the demands were, and how far beyond the boundaries of reason they stretched. It wasn't just about finding facts anymore, it looked like an inquisition. What was especially shocking was the scope of the targeting. Some of the content creators who received legal notices weren't even known for their commentary on celebrity culture. They were legal experts, media analysts, or creators who only briefly mentioned the Blake v. Baldoni case in passing. This raised another red flag. Was this about misinformation? Or was it about trying to control every mention of Blake Lively's name? One particularly disturbing case involved a mid-tier legal podcaster who was contacted by Blake's legal team demanding they turn over viewer data. Yes, viewer data. The legal team apparently wanted access to comments, emails, and back-end information from the podcast, all to prove a vague claim of coordinated defamation. Lawyers familiar with the First Amendment lit up online, immediately warning that such overreach could lead to counter-litigation. Some even predicted that this could become a landmark case if it escalated, and escalate it did. A group of 10 creators ranging from entertainment news channels to civil rights-focused legal analysts announced they had hired a joint legal team. They were ready to fight back and possibly file a protective order or even file countersuits if Blake's legal team didn't back down. The chilling effect this entire wave of subpoenas had on the creator community was undeniable. But it also sparked unity, and with that unity came a tidal wave of public support. On social media, hashtags began trending. Hashtag creators no trimmels, hashtag Blake back down, hashtag let us speak. People who had no prior interest in the Lively v. Baldoni case were now watching closely. Not to see who wins the lawsuit, but to see whether celebrity privilege would be allowed to bully the public discourse. Some commentators suggested that Blake may not have been fully informed about her team's tactics. There's speculation that the aggressive pivot to targeting creators came more from her attorneys than from Blake herself. Still, silence in the face of growing controversy often speaks louder than denial, and Blake remained publicly silent. Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni's team continued their approach, measured, calm, and surprisingly transparent. Though under strict confidentiality in many aspects, Baldoni's public appearances and subtle messages made it clear he wasn't afraid of scrutiny. He welcomed discussion. And that contrast with Blake Lively's rapidly tightening media lockdown was being noticed. Public trust is a fragile thing in celebrity culture. And once it cracks, especially when the internet is involved, it's nearly impossible to restore. Blake's attempt to regain control over the story had instead created another scandal within the scandal, a censorship controversy that now overshadowed the very lawsuit she filed. More lawyers began going public, some even stating that Blake's legal team may have crossed ethical lines. A former judge, now turned analyst, said on national television the courts are not a tool for media manipulation. If this continues, we may be looking at potential sanctions or motions to strike these subpoenas. By this point, the creators were no longer afraid. In fact, some were invigorated. They saw this moment as bigger than a celebrity case. It was about the future of digital commentary, legal overreach, and whether free speech online could survive pressure from powerful people with powerful lawyers. By the time the fourth wave of subpoenas dropped, the backlash against Blake Lively's legal team was at a boiling point. The creator community, once fractured across niches and platforms, had now coalesced into something much larger, a public resistance to what was being perceived as legal intimidation by a celebrity with considerable resources. What was most surprising to media insiders was how quickly public sentiment had flipped. Blake Lively, long considered one of Hollywood's most carefully curated public figures, stylish, graceful, calculated, was now being portrayed as someone desperate to suppress dissent, stifling commentary, and using the legal system as a weapon against the very people discussing her actions. And the creators weren't just defending themselves anymore, they were going on the offensive. In an unprecedented move, several high-profile creators formed a public coalition. They weren't just sharing subpoena stories, they were documenting everything, live streaming legal reactions, hosting panels with First Amendment experts, and inviting the public into their fight. This wasn't just a niche internet moment anymore, this was front-page news. By the end of that week, at least 7 major outlets, including legacy publications and major online platforms, had reported on Blake Lively's growing PR disaster. Their headlines pulled no punches. Blake Lively's legal team accused of harassing digital creators. When celebrities sue the internet, are we seeing a new era of censorship? From glamour to gag orders, the downfall of Hollywood's media darling. The message was clear. Blake's legal strategy wasn't just collapsing, it was backfiring on a global stage. Courtrooms are notoriously slow-moving machines, but outside the courthouse things were moving fast. Faster than even her legal team could manage. Clips of creators discussing the lawsuit began racking up millions of views. TikToks exposing the legal tactics went viral. Even mainstream influencers previously silent started chiming in. One YouTube channel known more for beauty and lifestyle content than legal commentary said in a video, "I don't even know who Justin Baldoni is. But what I do know is that I don't like it when powerful people go after regular ones for speaking out." That video alone brought 3 million views in 24 hours. And then came the courtroom moment that shifted everything. In a highly anticipated hearing, a judge openly questioned the scope of Blake Lively's subpoenas, asking whether the legal team had sufficient grounds to involve third-party commentators in what should have been a straightforward civil case. The courtroom fell silent. Blake's attorney tried to explain the relevance of the creator's content as part of a broader reputational issue, but the judge interrupted with a piercing question. Is this about defamation, or is this about controlling the narrative? That one line echoed online like a rallying cry. Clips from the courtroom audio were dissected frame by frame by creators. The judge's tone, his words, and the awkward responses from Blake's legal team went viral. It was no longer just a legal loss. It was a humiliation played out in front of millions in real time. To make matters worse, a leaked memo circulated on Reddit and later confirmed by a legal analyst appeared to show internal discussion from Blake's team expressing frustration over the uncontrolled spread of misinformation online and brainstorming tactics to secure influencer silence. Whether the memo was authentic or not, it fit the narrative already building, and the damage was done. Creators doubled down. They reminded viewers that their videos were based on public filings, legal analysis, and commentary protected by law, and they made clear that they weren't going anywhere. In fact, one popular podcaster said, "If they want to make an example out of us, fine, but they'll learn we are not afraid of the truth." Meanwhile, Baldoni's side appeared calm. His spokesperson gave a carefully worded but cutting statement to Variety. "We believe the court process should be respected, and public discourse should not be silenced by pressure, legal or otherwise." As all of this unfolded, something else began happening, something Blake Lively's team likely hadn't anticipated. The general public began digging into the case themselves. People were reading court documents, reviewing filings, asking real questions. The more they looked, the more inconsistencies they found. Why were certain filings sealed? Why were major details redacted? Why did the tone of her legal team seem so inconsistent across motions? It was no longer a celebrity legal story. It had become a cultural moment, one where creators, citizens, and internet users everywhere began pushing back against celebrity control and media manipulation. And the consequences for Blake Lively were only just beginning. By now, the public tide had clearly turned. What began as a bold lawsuit meant to assert Blake Lively's personal and professional boundaries had devolved into a full-blown reputational crisis. And in Hollywood, that's often more damaging than any court ruling. The final weeks of this phase of litigation brought with them two pivotal developments. 1. The media turning against Blake, not just quietly distancing themselves but actively criticizing her. 2. The court stepping in to halt the spread of Overreach. Let's break them both down. It started with legal blogs and creator commentaries, but by the end of the month, the headlines had spread into the very entertainment press that once celebrated Blake's every move. From The Hollywood Reporter to Entertainment Weekly and even legacy news platforms like The Guardian and The New York Times, the framing had changed. It was no longer Blake Lively fights for her reputation. It was Lively's legal strategy raises red flags about free speech. How Blake Lively's case sparked a creator uprising. Stars and subpoenas, the fight to silence the internet, and then came the late-night jokes. When talk show hosts begin turning a celebrity into the punchline, you know the public is no longer in their corner. Blake's silence, her team's overreach, and the viral reaction all became fodder for comedians. One quip in particular went viral: "You know you're in trouble when your lawyers are fighting TikTokers harder than the person you're actually suing." The audience roared. The clip was viewed over 6 million times on YouTube within 2 days. This moment officially crossed the threshold. Blake Lively's image was no longer in her control. Just when the dust seemed like it couldn't stir up more controversy, the judge issued a formal reprimand in a public order. It was subtle but direct. The court reminded all parties that discovery efforts must be narrow, relevant, and not chilling to lawful public commentary. In legal language, that was a clear reference to the growing backlash over the subpoenas targeting creators. Even more damning was what followed. The court struck down two subpoenas issued to independent content creators, calling them overbroad, speculative, and potentially abusive. This was the final blow, not to the case itself but to the credibility of the legal team's broader strategy. Judges rarely use language like that unless something has clearly overstepped boundaries. In response, Baldoni's attorneys filed a motion for cost recovery, suggesting that Blake's team should be financially penalized for wasting the court's time with unnecessary third-party subpoenas. That motion is still under review, but the symbolism was clear. Blake Lively had gone too far. Behind-the-scenes reports began surfacing of sponsor pullouts and paused brand deals. Blake's business partnerships, long a staple of her fashion-forward public persona, began reconsidering their next steps. While no brand officially dropped, her sources inside PR agencies hinted at paused campaigns and reputation reassessments. Celebrities once protective of their inner circles began to distance themselves. Some unfollowed Blake on social media, others liked posts in support of creators. One even posted a cryptic message that read, "Accountability looks different when it's your turn." And then there was Taylor Swift, Blake's longtime friend, who had noticeably not commented at all during the scandal. Some fans began wondering, had their friendship quietly fractured behind the scenes? Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni's image ironically was on the rise. His transparency, legal restraint, and respectful silence painted him as the stable, rational party in a lawsuit that now appeared more emotionally charged and media-obsessed than fact-driven. By the end of the 5th week of escalating public backlash, Blake Lively's case hadn't been formally dismissed, but the optics were devastating. Creators were stronger. Public support was behind them, the judge had issued clear warnings, and Blake's team was left scrambling to reframe the situation. Instead of repairing her reputation, the lawsuit had opened a Pandora's box, and the internet would not be closing it anytime soon. Blake Lively's legal campaign started as a bold attempt to reclaim her narrative and challenge the voices she believed were distorting it. But in a matter of weeks, it has become something very different. A cautionary tale about power overreach and the internet's refusal to be silenced. This wasn't just a lawsuit, it became a symbol of what happens when the old rules of celebrity collide with the new rules of digital discourse. And in that collision, something cracked. Not just in the courtroom, but in Blake's carefully maintained public image. By targeting creators, some with only a few thousand followers, her legal team awakened a movement, one that's bigger than any one video, tweet, or post. These creators weren't attacking her. They were doing what the internet does best: analyzing, discussing, and questioning power. And instead of engaging, her response was to subpoena, threaten, and attempt to control the conversation. But the conversation didn't stop, it grew louder. And in many ways, the very thing she tried to suppress became the thing that defined this case. Judges reprimanded her team, brands took notice. Her colleagues stayed silent or slowly drifted away, and the creators, they got stronger, united, determined, because they knew the stakes were bigger than one celebrity case. This was about setting a precedent. About proving that freedom of expression doesn't vanish when a Hollywood lawyer sends a letter. Justin Baldoni, through it all, remained measured and composed. His silence spoke volumes, and as Blake's legal tactics unraveled, he began to look less like a defendant and more like a survivor of a misguided campaign. In the end, this story isn't just about Blake Lively or content creators. It's about the evolving balance between fame and accountability, between influence and scrutiny. We're living in a time where celebrities are no longer untouchable, and the internet, for all its chaos, has become a powerful equalizer. Blake Lively may still have her day in court, but in the court of public opinion, the damage is done. The creators are not backing down, the fans are paying attention, the media has shifted, and the message is clear: you can't subpoena the truth, you can't censor criticism, and you can't silence a movement. Because no matter how famous you are, you don't get to control the internet.